Well, good morning, folks. As I introduced myself earlier, my name is David Seymour, and I am the policy analyst in the Saskatchewan office. The office of the Frontier Centre has recently opened. We've expanded from our original Winnipeg operation. We now have offices in 2 offices. I'd like to welcome everyone. It's good to see such a great crowd out at our first breakfast on the frontier in Regina. And this is something that we're going to make a monthly event, and so we'll look forward to seeing you come along more and more often, we hope. I came here from New Zealand specifically to do this job, and as you imagine, I meet new people just about every day, and they ask me a series of questions, particularly about the Frontier Centre. And I think the most interesting question that all people like to ask on all issues is why. Why would somebody work for an organisation like Frontier? Why would people donate money to a charity that doesn't have any physically tangible outputs, only ideas? And the way that I put it to people is simply like this. Next year, 200 people will walk out into a stadium, each carrying a flag. And it's important to realise that only 27 of those people actually live in a democracy that Canadians would consider free and fair. 27 out of 200. And when we look through the long lens of history, we know that such free and fair democracies are not only rare and precious, but it is something that you either use or lose, as unfortunately so many countries have found throughout their histories. And so it's really small wonder that there is so much interest and so much support for an organisation like the Frontier Centre, which is independent, which has the, I guess, capacity to do high-quality policy analysis, and is astute at promoting policy ideas in the public sphere across Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And I raised that point about democracy and its frailty and the contribution to it, not only as, I guess, an insight into what Frontier is really about, but also as an entree to our speaker today, Don Sandberg. Don Sandberg is going to be talking about the work that he's been doing over the past 2 years, and indeed the last 4 years of Frontier, but particularly the last 2, where he's travelled around reserves across Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and he really has been doing an investigation on the state of democracy there by surveying people directly on their views of governance on reserves across the prairie. So Don Sandberg is somebody who has worked in senior management positions on reserves, somebody who has previously written for the Drum magazine, somebody who has worked for the Frontier Centre for 4 years, and somebody who's never been afraid throughout his life to take a stand for what he believes in. I'd like to welcome you very warmly here to the first breakfast on the Frontier in Regina. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and welcome everybody here this morning. I grew up in the Northern Manitoba community of Gillam, mostly Aboriginal people, and at that time I can recall nobody wanting to be a chief, for the simple reason there was no money. I can recall everybody working. The railway was the biggest employer. For the other Aboriginal people, it was a way of trapping and fishing. For the chief, what he had at that time was limited. He was a replacement of the Indian agent. There was bullets, there was gasoline for outboard motors, there was fishing nets, there wasn't much else. As time progressed, more and more money came into play. I'm stuck to the floor here. And band councils were created. something that's foreign to Aboriginal people. And along with that, they adopted the white man's way of banned elections, which are a huge, huge problem today. We have several people here from different First Nations, and from each of their First Nation, they are going through problems with banned elections. In my province, and I see it over and over and over again, that there is a huge, huge problem with banned elections on First Nations. Why is that? The power and authority that band councils wield over their people is intoxicating. It can make you very rich. You can set your own salaries, unlimited travel, and you're answerable really to no one. Robert Nault championed the First Nations Governance Act that would have put in rules for banned elections, along with human rights. This was a minister that the First Nations people had never seen before, that actually came on to our First Nations and talked to us and said, what do you want? And as a result of that, the chiefs were invited. But of course they refused. And when the time came, they said, we weren't invited to participate in this. We don't want this First Nations Governance Act. Why? Because it would have set in rules for banned elections, and they like it the way it is right now, where they can create their own rules, they can abuse those rules, they can manipulate ban lists, and that, as a result, we're still going through reserve after reserve after reserve of problems right now with First Nations elections. Paul Martin was running for the leadership of the Liberal Party. When questioned on the First Nations Governance Act, he said if he became Prime Minister, he would kill it. At that point, it died. I'm sorry to say, but for the Liberal Party, they cater too much to the leaders, and they're looking for results at the poll as a result of this. I am disappointed with the Conservative Party, being the former Reform Party. I thought would be more aggressive and take to account and look at the warehouse that's probably stacked right to the roof of complaints from bands right across Canada over the years of corrupt elections, poor band governance, and done something about this. But I think one of the major problems that we have, and every successive government has, is that once they get into office and a file is put before them, they look at it and they see where it goes. At a $10.2 billion industry, it is huge. And if you can take the sagging treatment center scandal in Manitoba and the Caribbean cruise, if it were not for a federal election at the time, there would probably be no investigation. It hit the media all over, right around the world. So an inquiry was called. As a result of that, where did it lead? All the way up to the Deputy Minister's office. And I can tell you, in that health region, that health department, what the investigation brought out is barely the tip of the iceberg. So successive governments coming into office with that file on their desk look at it and say, my God, not on my watch. It is so big, it is so huge, that is my personal belief it would be enough to bring a government down. But somewhere along the line, somebody has to take ownership. And I don't know which government will be able to do it. Our people say we don't need the federal government. We can do things on our own. And I've been doing this for 20 years now. When it gets down to the simplest of issues, and you have 30 people behind you the night before, ready to go down and make their voices heard, you come out in the morning and you find yourself standing alone. And that's happened to me. Why? Some of the excuses? My sister needs a new house. My brother's daughter wants to go to university. These are the prices you pay for going against your band council. It's not very good. We have to make changes. Just recently in Ottawa, they tried to pass a bill there for human rights for Aboriginal people. The opposition parties banded together and killed it. Again, catering to the chiefs and councils. And the Aboriginal people on the reserve are left out in the cold again. Where does it end? Have they not learned that the people don't listen to the chiefs at election time? If you look at the star candidates in Manitoba, one just squeaked through for the Liberal Party. People on reserves are not stupid. They think for themselves. They'll vote for whoever thinks will do a better job for them. But it's been a hopeless dream as far as Aboriginal people go. Money has corrupted our people. For the simple reason I think we don't have more accountability in place. As a chief right now, you can travel anywhere in the world. You're accountable to no one. What a position. You want to spend 2 weeks in Vancouver? You go. Come back to your people, where's the report? It's coming, it's coming. We never see it. We've become so dependent on the federal government transfer payments that our people have been spoiled over the years. It's not the chiefs and councils of today that are to blame. It's when the money first started to flow in our First Nations. And the band council started giving everybody everything they wanted. Houses, money to travel, everything you need. I'll just relate a story. When I went back to work at my reserve as an economic development officer and ended up staying at a relative's house, and it was on an island, but there was a land link, a bridge. And I was told by the elders that your band council has to buy you a boat and motor because of where you live. And I said, I earn a good salary. I can buy my own boat and motor. No, 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 they have to buy you a boat and motor. So you see the mindset, the thinking that we've grown into. You have, in situations on First Nations where the mother and father are both working for the band seems the biggest employer and it should never be. And the door gets broken. Accidentally, weekend party, whatever. They don't go and fix it. They phone the band office and they keep after the band counselors until somebody comes and fixes their door for them. Similar with a window. We've got to get out of that way of thinking. We have to get into home ownership. That way I think we'll respect our property, our houses more when it's our home. We fix our own homes. Save the money for the families that really need it. For the ones that can't work, are disabled. Those ones need the help. Nobody owes us a living. We have to go out and earn our own. I get a little upset by seeing the millions of dollars that are going into First Nations right now when there's problems out in the cities or wherever. We have to bring our children home and we have to teach them our culture, who we are. And that is going back over 100 years. My God, we got to move on. That part should never be forgotten, though. That's an important part of our history. But to spend so much and so much time on our past that way, I think is ridiculous. They should spend more time on preparing these youth for the outside world and society out there and becoming participants in the workforce there and earning a good living. Because this builds on a person. What's taken away from a lot of our people, our men, for example, is the lack of employment, the lack now to go out fish and hunt for a living, and to live on social assistance is very degrading. And I think this contributes to a lot that's what's happening on some First Nations. I like to say, for example, can you recall when you were a teenager, 15, 16 years old, having a girlfriend and getting some money from your parents to go out on a weekend, $15, $20. When you're on social assistance on a First Nation, there isn't that $15, $20 to give to your child. Think of your son or daughter that wants to go to university, but because you express your views, maybe against band council at the time, you and your family are told that your children, your family gets nothing from the band. How frustrating it must be to these children to hear this, that there's no future for them, no way out. Does that contribute to suicide? I believe so. In some cases, yes. It's very frustrating. I've said over and over again, we have to start thinking outside the box, and I see a lot of First Nations doing that now. A Soyuz Indian band, 24 years ago, a young chief was elected by the name of Clarence Louis. The band was in third-party management. 20 years later, they're self-sufficient. They own more businesses per capita than any other reserve in Canada. They employ well over 1,000 people that come onto the reserve that they don't have enough jobs, band members for the jobs there to come and work. Now, these are leading examples. We've thought in this box so long that the government owes us a living. They owe us for damages in the past. Yes, there were a lot of damages to the people, but we have to start moving on. We've got resources all around us, and we're sitting there not taking advantage of them. We got to start thinking outside the box like Clarence Louis and taking advantage of what's there, partnering up with other companies, make them welcome, instead of being dictators on our own First Nations to our own people. I don't know why I brought this up here. I'm not even following it. Another huge problem that I see, probably not just in Manitoba, is what I call the huge snake. Until we cut the head off of that snake, we're only going to suffer more. I shouldn't be saying this, but I've seen it over and over and over again, is that we have so many qualified people on our First Nations, from electricians, carpenters, to you name it. And I see construction companies coming in, building the houses and other work that our people can be doing. I've sat in a house in Barons River where a father, 45 years old, is a licensed carpenter, and he's on welfare. Company came in, hired one band member, token Indian. And he says, why can't we be doing this? Exactly. This is a huge snake I talk about. The companies are willing to come in, place the brown envelopes in front of each councillor, and they accept it. It's not called bribes. It's not called kickbacks. They call it appreciation money. And this has been hurting us for a long time now. We should have companies on First Nations that can work with other First Nations to keep the money in the community circulating, instead of just coming in from Ottawa and going right back out of the community again. I'm running a little past my time here, so I'll wrap it up by saying Ottawa has to start clamping down. We have to set rules for band elections. We need human rights. We don't need more abuse from our leaders. Myself, for example, I've had everything taken away from me, from my band, for speaking out, writing. I'm not even covered from health care. I've got nothing. My land was taken away, my house was taken away, everything was taken away from me. I was made an example of, but there's many of us, I'm not alone, for speaking out. You live in a free country. We don't. In the confines of our reserve, it's not a free country. There's Aboriginal people sitting here today. From actually, at that table over there, from 2 different First Nations, and it's unbelievable that the both reserves are going through electoral turmoil right now. It is a huge, huge problem. My reserve is going through a similar problem right now, a forensic audit. something that doesn't happen very often. It's amazing it's even happening. INAC is not doing their job. They have the fiduciary responsibility of looking after the rights of all First Nations people. Somewhere along the line, they've dropped that to just band councils. It's almost like going back to the system of divide and conquer. We send our complaints into INAC, they send them back to the same band council we're complaining about. I tell people now, when they have problems, don't go to INAC. They're not going to help you. You'll realize after a 2-year cycle, you're given the same song and dance over and over again. Oh my God, that's terrible. Can you send us all the documents? And it goes on and on and on. And I still hear people doing the same thing. I don't say anything anymore. In 2 years, they'll learn on their own. But to end on a positive note, I guess, and there's one more thing I think, just to clarify that there, leading up to the June 29th, when the bands, reserves, talked about blockading roads, railways. The Minister of INAC threatened to come in and audit the Grand Chief's office in Manitoba that receives $50 million a year. Why do you have to threaten? That should be mandatory every year. We know that a lot of chiefs take trips to, well, actually one of the biggest ones in Manitoba there, that was going to block the rail line, most vocal chief, went to China, paid for it from the Grand Chief's office. Where's the report? How is it going to benefit our people? Never came. My chief, and now the Grand Chief in Manitoba, went to the Netherlands. Never seen a report yet. So where are all these expensive trips going if it's not benefiting our people? There are a lot of problems in our First Nations. And we need people to start speaking out, because government doesn't listen to Native people. To the tax-paying public, they listen. The white public. And we need help. It's a dysfunctional system. We need rules for band elections. We shouldn't be fighting. And it just tears families apart. I believe there's 3 elected councillors here today that got elected, but they're not part of the old regime. They can't get their checks signed. They're left out of everything. They're probably the ones that want to do the right thing for the people. And in many cases, that's not the way they operate. I'm only referring to my First Nation anyway, and when I tried to do the right things, I isolated myself more and more until I was eventually fired. But by that time, I was so burnt out anyway from being sent all over the place doing everything else except economic development that I almost cried and said thank you. I could have been very rich. I refused all appreciation monies. Had I accepted those, I'd be taking trips myself to Europe. Is it small stuff? Is it nickels and dimes? My first check would have been $50,000. But we have positive First Nations out there. I try and promote them as much as I can. It's sad that we have to dwell so much on a negative, but I want to spend more time in the future here of traveling to these First Nations, which President Peter Hollard promised me this summer would be a slow summer, and I haven't stopped running yet though, that I could go to these places and spend time with them, go through their books like they've offered, and promote what they are doing. There's a good friend of mine, a chief in Chillicothe Prairie, Manitoba, Dakota Teepee First Nation. It was a hereditary leadership, but they were killing each other there. There was fights with 2x4s, baseball bats. They burnt down the rec center. They burned down the gasoline station. They were burning houses down. INAC finally had to step in and call an election. Cornel Pashy was elected, former banker, doing a great job up there. He started thinking outside the box. This is just a small example. We have programs, walk programs if you want, every year for youth. So many are picked, clean yards, cut grass. He thought outside the box. He started contacting businesses in Portage la Prairie. When I was visiting him one day, not long ago, Walmart called that morning, wanted 3 more. Another business called, wanted 2 more people. He was having a hard time supplying people. He was running out of people to send. What an excellent idea. Why does it have to be within that box, within that reserve? They're learning sales, how to manage business, meeting the public every day. That's excellent. These are the things we have to promote, which I want to promote, have the time to go out and meet these. I've been invited to Rolling River. I haven't got a chance to go back. They're doing great things there. That chief just got elected Grand Chief of the Southern Chiefs Organization in Manitoba, so I'm expecting great things from them. When I stopped in there in that short time and started talking, there was document after document coming out there on where they were heading in the areas of human rights services. It was great. This is what we need more of. And I'll end on that, and thank you all for coming, and I'd like to take the time to thank Peter Hawley here too for this excellent platform that I've been given to get the word out on some of the issues affecting First Nations people and maybe some of the direction that we have to go. I wish I had more time. It's a huge area, and there's so much to talk about, and I'm sad I had to dwell so much on the negative end of it, but if you don't bring it out, it doesn't get dealt with.
Can you talk about the AGI, maybe?
Yeah, the AGI, there was the Aboriginal Governance Index. Like I said, I went right off track here. We traveled to First Nations in Manitoba 2 years in a row. This year we've included Saskatchewan. Mervyn Key over here worked with me in Saskatchewan and a couple other people. And we were to gauge each First Nation and where they were at in the areas of health, education, band elections, human rights, services, and the response has been excellent. The first year in Manitoba was hard. The second year, it was about 98% response from the leaders was excellent. Come on into our community. You're welcome to poll our people. The first year was very bad. This year in Saskatchewan, we've had some problems. Mervyn has run into problems. They don't want us in there. They don't want our people talking to us. But I think it's going to benefit everybody, because what we're trying to do is find what some of the problems are and try and correct those. And all we can do is advise. The people don't have to accept what we come up with through our research and that, but it's only to help improve First Nation communities. And a lot of First Nation leaders have recognized this, and they've opened their doors to us, and I really appreciate that. There was one exception in Manitoba where I was thrown off the reserve. There, it was just a bad timing. There was a beating from gang members, and the chief had run out of money to pay the band constables. RCMP were brought in, but they referred to me as a reporter for the Winnipeg Free Press at that time, and I was thrown into a boat and hauled out of there pretty fast by these band constables who were working voluntarily at the time, and then calling the boat operator up and saying to him, "Don't tell him what's going on in the community." Anyway, it's the first thing he did when he gets going down there. So this is what's happening, you know, and I got everything there as I went. But this, I did an article on this, and it also the National Post asked if they could reprint the article. So this chief got a lot of attention he didn't expect. But he did say that I am welcome to come back. I'm a little hesitant there now. I don't have a flak jacket or anything, so I told Peter, if I'm going back in there and you send me back in, I want camouflage paint for the face, a survival knife, and some dried food that I can hide in the bush, and at the last minute make a run for the airplane. Thank you. Oh, before I go, there's a book here. We have some at the front here. It was written by a native lawyer from British Columbia. His mother is a chieftain. He speaks the same language I do, where we have to go, where we've come from. And actually, I start on page 145 there, so forget the rest, just start on page 145. No. But it's an excellent book, and it's got international attention. The Minister of Indian Affairs has been calling him on a regular basis. I understand even Jay Leno wants him on there. It's just, there was an article in Maclean's last week, and I got a call from the reporter there, I'm part of that article too, and she asked if I'd heard about Calvin Aline. Well, yes, I'm in a book, and we did have him here in Regina and in Winnipeg, and he's a very bright man, and he's something like the Clarence Louis, and I've been lumped in that group. Clarence Louis, Calvin Aline, and Don Sandberg speak in the same language, but after so many years, I'm sure glad to see these people coming out, because I felt so alone for so long and been hammered in every direction for speaking my views, but I've never backed down. Thank you. Now we have a short time for some questions, if anybody has any questions.
What changes have to be made about that to support you better?
We need a minister like Robert Nault again. Not one that's just going to listen to the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats are in there from government to government to government. As you can see in the Saskatchewan Treatment Center scandal, it went all the way up to that office, those offices. Robert Nault could think on his own 2 feet. We need another minister strong like that. Whether Chuck Strahl has that or not, we'll have to wait and see. But we need somebody that's going to stand up and says, this is the right thing. We're going to do it. And follow through with it. Hopefully that's what it'll take. We can't do it on our First Nations. Our leaders do not want changes. It's too damn comfortable for them right now. So they will fight it tooth and nail. So there's huge challenges to making any changes.
A number of years ago, when Mr. Chrétien was the Prime Minister, and I think Mr. Martin was involved with the party too, there was Mr. Chrétien's background was that he was First Nations minister at one time, before he was Prime Minister. He suggested at one time a change in the Indian Act.
The white paper.
The mere suggestion of a change in the Indian Act brought out violent reaction from First Nations all across Canada. But it seems to me that you got to go beyond the minister. It's something that a prime minister either believes in or he doesn't believe in. Either the prime minister of a federal reigning political party changes things, or it doesn't get changed ever. And it seems to me, and I'm not up on the Indian Act, and I don't pretend to be, but it seems to me that having a union vote to decertify itself has a better chance than changing the Indian Act in this country today.
Robert Nault's First Nations Governance Act. Do you not think that the Prime Minister was involved? I think you know very well that the Minister cannot go ahead without the Prime Minister's approval on such a scope as the changes in the Indian Act as the First Nations Governance Act. It was not a perfect piece of legislation, mind you, but it was something that the government brought to the people, directly to the people, for the first time that I can remember, and said, what do you want? What do you need? So I'm pretty sure, yes, you've got a very good point there. It would be nice for the Prime Minister to come out and make the announcement rather than his minister. But we all know that the minister can never make an announcement like the First Nations Governance Act and without the Prime Minister's knowledge and participation in that.
The other thing that we hear today, and you can attracted whether it's myth or truth, is that the First Nations people do not show up and vote in federal and provincial elections.
No, that's false. No, they do get out, and more so as of late, because I'll give you an example of my reserve. We're very involved in politics. Most of the leaders support the Liberal Party because the Liberals are willing to bend over backwards. Take, for example, leading up to the last federal election, the Kelowna Accord, $5.2 billion, with very little checks and balances. Well, we call that vote buying. The leaders went out en masse, especially on my reserve, buses are driven around the community to haul people to the polls. They pick their candidates too. Tina Keeper, north of 60. Our Grand Chief, she's from my reserve, actually a cousin of mine. And he was one to pick her. It wasn't Red Jalcock. No, very active. People do get out and vote, but like in every society, there's other people that don't really care. Bert, a preacher here, is sitting in the back from Manitoba. Pick one party, he's voted for that party all his life. No, we're very active. Very active. But we don't need leaders telling us who to vote for. We have minds of our own. We make our own decisions. We get the bus rides free to vote, but we don't vote for the candidate that wants us to vote for all the time.
Don, would you agree that it's a lot easier to deal with these problems and many other similar explosive problems if you have a majority government? Sometime in the future, that there's an impediment to dealing with this, and
Yes.
to stir a can of worms in the middle of a majority government?
Most definitely. We'd have human rights today if we had a majority government office. Yes.
Can I ask for, like, I know we're our First Nations people here with the problem, and you know, we could clearly see that what we're doing, but could I have an introduction of people who want to participate? They're here, like, so maybe there's somebody here that could help us with our problem after
I'm not sure if I'd like to go around the whole meeting.
I can see, like, I could hear real fast, like,
I mean, outside or...
Perhaps what you could do is very quickly just introduce yourself, and anyone who feels they might be able to help you will be able to approach you after the breakfast.
well, that's good, and anybody sitting here, we're from Queen First Nations, and we're having problems with our band right now, and we're trying to go for accountability, and the councilors here are left out, like, the forum, if there's anybody in the department that would like to help us come forward and stop all this corruption, and tell us the steps, so, here.
Okay, and sorry, your name was?
Please tell me my name, from the Queen First Nations.
Mervyn G.
America is under a situation like this. So it's all about their treaties when you look right down at the governance. The first treaty that was ever signed between the Indian people and the European people, it was put on the wampum bill that our system would never change. We'd always govern ourselves. When we went into the treaties, we didn't go home. We went in there with our Creator on our side to sign treaties. Today we're having a lot of problems because a lot of our people are forgetting to take the Creator with them. They're thinking of more the financial aspect of the game, what money they can get out of it, and so forth. And in the process of it, we're losing a lot of our treaty entitlements. Because we're overlooking a lot of them, because we're just jumping at the first chance. A lot of our chiefs and our councils are not taking into consideration the research that has to be done on their reserves for paying for their business. A lot of the people are just like, it's one side here, one side there. Family against family.
I'll just cut you off here. We're just running out of time there, Mervyn, sorry. Mervyn even suggested outside here on his First Nation that the next election, they just put the same council right back in because there's so much bribery and everything else that you can't compete against that. So why not just put the same ones back in? Maybe the people will finally realize that they have to start a different line of thinking on how they're going to improve in their First Nations rather than the status quo. But we have to start thinking outside the box.
Oh, thank you again, Don Sandberg.